Hey yo, what's poppin'? It's your girl Wolfy, and today we're learning how to press buttons in Final Fantasy XIV. The critically. Oh, I have received word you can no longer play this game. We are full and they have to leave. Oh, unlucky. Well, for those of you who are allowed to play Final Fantasy, let's talk about pressing buttons. For like 90% of the DPS guides out there, I'll reiterate just for posterity, combos exist and they involve you pressing a button and then hitting the next button that lights up until it doesn't happen. You're welcome. Now, I've said what pretty much any other guide telling you how to press buttons would tell you, and let me expand on the real information that can actually help you. Maybe. So to start off, I want y'all to know that there are two major components to pressing button. Component A, mechanics. Component B, DPS. So for mechanics, they are things that enemies do that cause you damage or basically attempt to kill you. So basically we do mechanics in order to succeed and win the fight. You know those little nice markers on the bottom of the floor? Yeah, those are mechanics. A lot of getting through these fights is simply being able to do the dance. Contrary to popular belief, DPS is not the end-all be-all. I know. It's rough out there. But trust me when I say that I'd rather you do a mechanic and have garbage tier DPS than have amazing DPS and end up dying all the time, which honestly just results in you having bad DPS. Anyways, the game has common mechanics like in and out, or dynamo chariot as a bunch of nerds would call it. As the name would suggest, you go in and out of the danger zone. Then you get obscure ones like limit cut, where odds get slashed and evens get dashed into, or annoying ones like Nisi, where if you breathe incorrectly near someone, you fuck it up and die. And then let's mainly call these parts where you can avoid damage the bad. Thanks, Dan. Avoid getting hit by the bad, and generally you'll be okay. You didn't see that. Anyways, generally speaking, you do this and you're well on your way on becoming a Final Fantasy mediocre player. But wait, there's one last thing I need you to consider, but not really. There's more things to consider, but a lot of people consider this part incorrectly, and that of course is DPS. Now this is the part where things get interesting because not only do you have to do the dance above, you also have to deal damage. It's what brings the difficulty together in Final Fantasy. It's the fact that you have to pair this while also pressing buttons constantly, and ideally not dropping dots, like me, not letting important cooldowns sit for too long, etc, etc. Generally speaking, as a healer with a 2-button rotation, like your dot and your 1 damage button for damage, and a tank where you might have 2 main damage rotations, or your 1, 2, 3, 4 combo, it's pretty easy to do. But as soon as you go into DPS, you have to keep track of all sorts of different cooldowns and raid buffs and timings, and also not dying, and you're pressing a ton of buttons. It's your one job. If you can manage that, you're well on your way to becoming a better player than a good chunk of the people who play the game. Also, a lot of people would mention rotations and spit foam at the mouth if you're not playing the perfect rotation, but in truth, as long as you have a relatively strong grip on your class and make use of your buttons, you're probably doing well enough. I'm not here to police your gameplay, but I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that Art of War is a gain on 2 targets, and generally speaking, if you see 3 or more enemies, you should be using your AoE abilities over your single target abilities. To break DPS down further, we're going to talk about AoE rotation and single target rotation. AoE rotation. This refers to your ability to press AoE, or area of effect abilities that affect the area around you. In other MMOs, this might mean casting a spell that rains fire or something on the enemy or on an area. But in Final Fantasy, it really just refers to your character's ability to press a button and it hits multiple targets. Unfortunately, the game does a horrible job at showing players that this exists because some jobs get their AoE really late into the game. For an example, Dragoon gets their first AoE at level 40, which you're pretty much at the end of ARR, and at that point, you've been doing single target this whole time. You might get trapped into just only doing single target even when your AoE is available to you. Generally speaking, every class at level 50 has an AoE of some kind, so make use of it. It's very useful and is literally designed for hitting large packs of mobs, consisting of 3 or more, and you actually deal more damage overall for doing so. The rotation for a generic AoE would literally be the initial AoE button followed by the AoE button that lights up afterwards. Depending on the class, you might also earn gauge or something, which will permit you to use an even stronger AoE. So if you're tired of playing spin to win and you finally landed yourself on a boss fight, well, you'd never believe it, but this is the part where your single rotation comes into play. Single rotation is exactly that. When you're attacking one target, this rotation ignores most of your AoE abilities. Note that I said most and not all, because some finisher moves are AoE, like Paladin's Confettier, or like 90% of Dancer's Kit is AoE. So, you know, if you were to go on that alone, if I said all of them, then you wouldn't be using very many buttons at all, and it would actually hinder your performance. But their strongest moves sometimes still happen to be AoE, but the main job of this rotation is to deal the most damage to a single target, whether it's with a big move that does AoE as well, or if it's just a regular single target ability. This is where those videos of YouTubers like explaining guys like Misshapen Stool or Desperado Final Fantasy or whatever comes in. They come in and tell you how to play your job optimally, or at the very least what buttons do for your job so you can apply them when needed. Raid buffs is another topic that I just kind of threw in. Honestly, I've usually ignored this for a long time, learning the game and stuff like that, but generally speaking, you want to line up your raid buff with everybody else. If you see a dancer's technical step, a battle litany, or anything like that, you're going to want to toss out yours as well, because this will allow you to deal more damage overall if they're stacked together. This is usually around 3 GCDs into the fight, and people usually end up drifting it later on in the fight because everyone panics due to the mechanics happening in the game. But it's not too much to be worried about, because as long as you understood the first bit that I showed you, and you understand those things, you pretty much know how to play Final Fantasy and press the buttons as well as you really need to. And if you've made it this far, congratulations. You can learn most fights probably faster than most other players, and honestly, you're just built different. I'm proud of you. Wait, hold on. Yeah, hello? My content was too powerful to be shown, and I'm on a hit list from every Final Fantasy XIV YouTuber in existence making guides? Oh, well, if that's all, I'm not worried. They probably need to make a guide for the hitman on how to pull the trigger.